Well, good evening, folks. For those of you who have started to join me, I know we're probably going to have quite a few more come in based on the list of folks that signed up for this topic. Tonight, I want to do a little housekeeping before I start into the topic for this being our second webinar I've been doing with the NRG Tribe and Future Focus Family Medicine. Been trying to do these topics based on things that you as patients and readers of our websites, trying to make sure that this is information that you're interested in and that you want to learn more about. I've set these up in a way that we're going to do some presentation, meaning a brief, 20 minute or so talk on a given topic. And then we'll always have a Q&A session. I don't really have a set endpoint for that. It's just going to depend on interest. This system is fairly new to us, this GoToMeeting type system. So if it's a little clunky or my ability to get to your, turn on your mic and things like that is a little bit slow, just bear with me. So I wanted to thank you guys for coming and being a part of these types of educational programs. So tonight, I'm going to talk about stress and why it might be killing you. And I'm going to get into some details about that. I want to let you know that anytime during the talk, you're welcome to, I believe you should be able to click and on the sidebar and go ahead and, you can do a question if you want. I may not answer it right away, but you can make sure that you get your question in. And at the end, when we get into the Q&A, depending on who's available and listening, I may go ahead and try to, turn on your mic or that type of thing, so we can interact that way. But I hope to answer your questions. I know there was a couple on Facebook I'll have to pull up. People were asking about a couple things before the event. And in case you missed this, that's why I'm jumping straight into it. I know it's right after work. Some people may not be able to jump right in right away. But what I was going to tell you is that I'm going to go ahead and post this on the NRG Tribe website in the next day or so. That's nrgtribe.com. I'm also going to put it on the NRG Tribe YouTube page, which I do quite a bit of material there. And then I'll also, for those of you that follow Facebook and things like that, I'll post it there. I think that's all the housekeeping I have. So I'm going to jump straight into this topic that I entitled Stress, Why It Might Be Killing You. I guess it makes sense to first discuss what I am calling stress. Stress is the way I describe it, it's a physiologic issue. It's a hormonal, chemical, and neurologic change that occurs over time. And it can come in various forms. It can be short-acting, meaning acute stress, or it can be a chronic stress. Acute stress is actually beneficial, and I'll kind of describe a little bit of both. But basically, stress is a chemical event. So let's say, and I don't get into different types of stressors, but let's make sure that we understand that a stress is anything that causes cortisol, which is a hormone that is released from a gland called the adrenal gland that sits above each of our kidneys. When cortisol rises, this causes a cascade of events in the human body. The first of those events is it tells the liver to dump sugar, to prepare, dump out energy into the system so that you can prepare to run, flee, fight, or flight. That's what this hormone is. It's the fight or flight hormone. It also raises blood pressure, so it makes you have plenty of blood flow to your muscles. It shunts all the blood away from the internal organs and out to the muscles so you can run or fight. It sharpens your vision. It increases your senses, and it even boosts your immunity. And that's all in the acute phase. So these all sound like good things, but it also causes your heart to race. It can cause you to break out in a sweat. It just has a whole pile of hormonal events. That's good when the saber-toothed tiger has walked into your cave and you had to fight him off. And then the battle's over and you got a couple scrapes and cuts, but you're alive and you can go back to a lower cortisol level. We're really going to talk about today is chronic high stress and stress that, and the different types of stress that can cause cortisol to be released over a long period of time. This is really what we're most interested in today. So as I get into this, keep in mind there is a whole pathway that goes into this, but basically the pathway is going to be the stimulus for stress, which we'll cover, the different types. Then there's the things that happen. So I just mentioned adrenal glands release cortisol. Cortisol causes the liver to dump sugar. Sugar rises, heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up. When the sugar's high, insulin has to go high. Insulin stores sugar in the midsection as belly fat. So you can already start to see where some of these things, if it goes on for too long, can lead to chronic medical problems, and we'll talk about that. So, all right, so the different types of stress. So I like to lump them into three: physical, mental / emotional, and spiritual stressors. I'll take each one in turn. I think the easy ones to understand would be maybe the physical stressors. This would be things like injuries, a back injury, a knee, a broken bone, a concussion, a surgery, having a planned surgery or a C-section or having a baby. These are all things that are stressful to the body. Exercise is a stressor. I consider it a good stressor, but one can overdo exercise as well, and that can be an issue. If you look at any type of chronic pain, if you look at lack of sleep, sleep apnea, these are all physical ways that can cause stress and lead to issues with all the cascade of cortisol. The next I'd lump into is mental and emotional. And these kind of cross over a little bit with the category that I call spiritual in some ways. But I want you to think about things that maybe you've been, quote, stressed over in your life. Relationship stress. Heck, 95% of the reasons that people come into my clinic seems like nowadays are related to some form of stress. That's why this is so important. Relationship strife, financial stress, trouble at work, workplace stressors, lack of respect, bad childhood experiences, things that just you weren't taught right, you were mistreated, communication problems, misunderstandings, learning disorders. These are all things that mentally can cause us to be socially put in situations where we release cortisol. And it's different than caveman days where we're just fighting off saber-toothed tigers. This stress can go on, and it can just go on and on and on. And this is where the risks come in and the problems. I also think that social media generally, when you look at, and I'll get into this in the treatment area, but the incessant negative news, the constant comparison and social jockeying that goes on Facebook and these types of things. I think these are all things that can be quite stressful and cause this cascade inappropriate cortisol release. The next major section under types of stress I would consider spiritual stressors, and that can be. I think most of you understand what I mean by this, but I lump that into things like lack of spiritual life. Now, I have a Christian background, and I believe in God, and I believe that there is a God that works in our lives and helps us with maintaining a purpose and a focus, so that as human beings, when we go through our lives and we're working and raising families, we understand that there's a higher purpose. And there's lots of research that shows that people that have a higher purpose, people that believe or at least have some type of spiritual life, are healthier. What that translates into is they're less stressed. I know that when my spiritual life is right, I harbor much less of this type of it's like a cloud of stress that can hover over me. And I've seen this in my patients as well. I, in fact, have seen people that have, if you looked at them externally, they're wealthy, they're physically strong, and they work out every day, and they've got, beautiful wife and kids, and they've got everything. Their job is awesome, and everything about, you think this person has everything dialed in. They're just got everything dialed in. But then they come in and they're still displaying signs and symptoms of stress-related conditions, which I'm going to talk about. I think it's because this spiritual void, the old saying, mind, body, spirit, I think it's part of that triad. If you're missing that, I think as human beings, whether you believe in God or not, the triad is there, and I see it. It's too evident to me. That's why I'm talking about it the way I do. It's just too evident that it's part of how we're made. We have a spirit, and if it is unbalanced, mistreated, abused, neglected, that causes stress, and it will cause all the same chemical events in the physical form of the body that we call stress. So people who walk around that have experienced past emotional traumas, abuse, regret, anger, resentment, physical, mental, sexual abuse, exploitation, neglect, social injustice of any type, even generationally, real or imagined, can lead to this lumping of what I call spiritual stressors. I hope that makes sense. I don't want to beat those up too much, but I think I'm painting the picture that stress can come from different aspects of the human experience. It can be a physical, a mental or emotional type stress, and then it can also be more of a higher spiritual lack of purpose or more spiritual type injury, if you will, that leads to stress. So on that note, what does this look like? Why did I mention earlier that 95, maybe 85 to 90% of the people I treat, stress has something to do with why they're seeing in my clinic? Think about these conditions: high blood pressure, depression, anxiety, fibromyalgia, cancer, migraine headaches, chronic neck and back pain that has no physical finding associated with it, such as a slipped disc or a broken vertebrae or something like that, abdominal pain, indigestion, heartburn, high cortisol will cause or contribute to all of those. If you look at that's from the Western perspective. If you look at the Eastern philosophy of medicine, they might talk about blocked chi, stagnant organs, pain body. This is popularly talked about by Eckhart Tolle. Wrote the book called When the Body's. He wrote the book called The Power of Now. Talks about a pain body, and I believe he's talking about the physical, energetic symptom of stress in the human body. People talk about, and yoga and Eastern philosophies, they talk about blocked chakras and different levels of energetic blockage in the body, which ultimately manifest as diseases, just like the Western medicine, describes. We might call this negative energy or negative spirit. These are all things that people carry with them, and they can be found as something as simple as tightness in the neck. This is energy that's being held there. Western doctors will call it, muscle tension or tension headaches and things like that. But in the Eastern side, they would call it blocked chi. And there would be other manifestations and treatments that they would recommend. So when I listed off all of those different things, that's why this topic is so important, because in some form or fashion, chronic protracted stress, we're not talking about acute stress. Acute stress is good. Chronic protracted stress contributes or causes all of these things. I personally think that if you look at things like high blood pressure, I'm pretty sure that high blood pressure is, I think for most people that have, quote, essential hypertension, I think mostly that's high cortisol. This is a person that doesn't, at a conscious level, they don't understand that they have ongoing subconscious stressors on a regular basis, and I think that's why they have that. I think that's why that's going on. Depression and anxiety are, I think, mental and emotional. In many cases, they're mental and emotional symptoms, if you will, of chronic protracted stress. I just read a book called When the Body Says No by Gabor Mate. He talks a lot about how autoimmunity, even breast cancer and other types of cancer, Lou Gehrig's disease, and other neurologic conditions are all dramatically associated with chronic protracted stress, and also how we deal with stress and personality styles and things like that. In fact, think of a person who suppresses their own needs for everyone else's needs. Someone that willingly suppresses their own needs to take care of everyone else. That personality style creates a lot of internal mental, emotional, and spiritual stress which then ultimately starts to manifest as diseases. And it's more highly associated with things like breast cancer than genetics are, that personality type. So this is how powerful stress, what a powerful issue chronic stress can be. Cancer, migraine headaches, indigestion, insomnia, sleep problems. How many times have you been stressed out about something, problems at work, problems at home, financial issues, and laid awake staring at the ceiling? I know I have. Been there, done that. As a physician, I've been exposed to plenty of stress and anxiety and puckering about different patient scenarios and situations and things that arise in my career. I definitely am familiar with how this can affect the human body when it comes to almost nearly every medical problem. The other one last one before I go on to kind of stress reduction and then we get into our Q&A, I'd like to mention a few others. I mentioned depression and anxiety, but one of the ones I want to mention because it's really common. I get a lot of people that come to my clinic and say, I can't focus. I need Adderall. I need something to help me focus because I can't get by at school. I can't get by at work. These are adults. This is not children trying to get through the second grade. What's interesting is two comments I have about that. One, decreased attention span is characteristic, and poor memory is characteristic of a person who has high stress. So when these people are coming in and go, well, I got 2 jobs, I'm working, I'm going to night school, and I'm holding down this, and I got 3 kids, and I'm a single mom, and all these kind of things that go on. And they say, but I really can't focus on my schoolwork, and I need help with that. Can you write me an amphetamine? Adderall, Ritalin, these types of things, right? Well, here's the problem with this story. First off, the decreased attention span or the decreased focus is a simple manifestation of high stress, chronic stress. So we're now starting to ask for a medication to treat something that needs to be treated with lifestyle adjustment, changing the path that person's on. The second thing is that the medicines used to increase focus directly tell the adrenal glands to release cortisol. So here's yet one more I don't think I mentioned in the physical section is chemical stressors, nutritional stressors, stimulants, caffeine, alcohol, high sugar diets, and stimulants like Adderall and Ritalin. These all tell the adrenal glands to pump out cortisol. So yes, the foods you eat, the drugs you take can cause the same thing we're talking about. So you wonder why doctors are, and certainly in my clinic, but a lot of doctors are getting very reluctant to write these medications because the handwriting is on the wall that they cause some of the same problems that we're treating when you look at stress. So I'll move on from that. Let's talk about stress reduction. There again, I blocked them into physical, mental, kind of emotional, and spiritual. By the way, I will have a handout at the end of this that's going to summarize some of this, even with some links that you can, they're active links. So if I mention a website or something like that, just know that that's going to be on a link that you can go click on later. I'm going to try to figure out where this is posted here. It should be posted here somewhere. Maybe it's in the, when you got into the video, if you click on the join the conference, there might be a little tab to the side that says that there's a document you can download. That might be it. If you don't see it there, just keep a lookout for this post on Facebook and I'll make sure it's linked there. So stress reduction, first, physical. I love this one because it's low-hanging fruit and most people can do this. The first one, of course, that falls under physical. How many times have you ever gone for a run or a vigorous exercise and just felt good? You just felt better when you're done. That's because exercise decreases cortisol once you've recovered from the exercise, and it causes an increase in endorphins, which are your repair and feel good, your natural morphine. That's what this does. It releases tension, it lowers blood pressure. It's a great tool for changing your neurochemistry. Heck, they've even got studies that show regular aerobic exercise is better for depression and anxiety than even SSRI drugs like Paxil or Prozac. The reason that is because it lowers cortisol and it lowers stress. And if done regularly, and ideally I would say 45 minutes, 4 to 5 times a week is ideal. I believe that is a great tool for lowering stress and chronic stress. Other physical things you can do: massage, acupuncture, breath work, healthy sex. These have all got research that show that the utilization of those activities or tools or physical treatments all tend to lower cortisol, improve health, improve all health parameters. And all we have to do is incorporate those into our life in some capacity. Now, again, this list is not so that you go out and start doing all of these tomorrow. The idea is just look at what's out there that's been shown to be effective and start to incorporate some of this to lower your chronic stress. Other physical sort of martial arts, if you will, one of my favorites is yoga. Yoga is a part of the Ayurvedic medical history, the ancient Sanskrit-related Eastern medicine philosophy. It's one of the tools that's used in addition to nutrition and physical movement and others. But yoga is a sort of combination of spiritual, not religious, but spiritual, physical, and breath work all in one. So it's a combination treatment. So is Tai Chi. So is Qigong. These are all non-combat martial arts, or traditionally non-combat martial arts. And those are things that can be practiced by almost anyone. You can do Qigong sitting in a chair. You can do Tai Chi in a park. You can do it in a closet. I mean, it doesn't take space, time, gym memberships, and things like that. So those are just a few. I don't want to overwhelm you with too many, and those are on the stress handout that I'm going to make available to you. The next one is mental. Let's talk about toxic relationships. We've probably all had a few of those. We might have some that we can't avoid, but there are situations where relationships, you've been around that person that's just so negative that they bring out the worst in you, or they cause you to constantly have to recharge yourself to deal with their stuff that they're either burdening you with, dumping on you, or challenging you with on a regular basis. As best you can within the scope of your social structure, try to avoid those, change them, or learn new techniques to improve your social skills or your conflict resolution skills. That means that can be counseling, it can be reading, self-help, it can be different social, find different friends, if you will, get into more active social groups and things like that, so you meet more people and expand and start to realize that there's other people out there. I'm not talking about necessarily dating and this and that. I'm talking about just expose yourself to other people so that you understand that some people are positive, some people are negative, some people are going to contribute, some people are going to take away. And toxic relationships are a huge source of stress. Identify them first. Decide if they can be changed. If they can't be changed, then sometimes you have to leave those behind. So I mentioned counseling. The next one is positive mantras, positive mental downloads. I kind of like this. I do this every day, by the way. It's part of my morning routine. I have positive mantras. I always write them down. The one for the last couple of days has been message to myself: don't talk, just act. Don't say, just show. Don't promise, just prove. I've got numerous. I've got one for every day. I look them up. You can find them on the internet, different things like that. But I like to put something in my head every day that's positive, that I set an intention and started my day with the intention that I'm going to try to move forward in a positive fashion. And what that does is it tends to just preset me at a lower stress level. It also prepares my mind to be more flexible and tolerant of others, and help me understand rather than react to the world. And when that happens on a good day, I feel better and I have less stress. And I think my patients that I've recommended that to also do. But it takes planning and it takes writing it down. But positive mantras, read things that are positive. If you're reading things that are negative all the time, don't do it. Just get away from it. Don't do it. Think about, get away from the negative media. I mentioned that earlier. Media, get away from things that are showing negative imagery on a regular basis. It's not good for your mind, and it's not good for you have to spend energy to reset the negative things that you've received through that course. There's one little website I'm going to list here, and again, there's going to be a link on the handout I give you. It's called positivityblog.com. I like that little guy. He's I think he's Swedish or Denmark, or he's from Denmark or something. But anyway, he is a guy that all he does is post positive mantras, brief little articles that take 2 minutes to read that teach us about how to be positive and how to see the positive in the world. And you can't help but read that for 10 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes, and just feel better. And just say, look, I just going to start the day better. So I think that's one way. JamesClear.com. He's another guy that I've listed his website. He just has a book out called Atomic Habits. That's worth a read if you're looking to change habits and be positive and move forward with good, healthy behaviors. Look up JamesClear.com. Slow down. This is another mental exercise. Just stop doing things. Stop saying yes to everything just be out of sheer obligation. It's okay to say no sometimes and have nothing happening. Now, I'm not saying quit your job and don't take your kids to school or whatever. I'm just saying if when given the option of like, okay, I could add one more project on the plate, or I could just finish what I'm doing and then decide if I want to move on to something else. I've heard it said, sometimes this offends people when I say it to them in a clinical setting, but busyness is a form of laziness. When you're busy beyond ability to see straight, it's because you're not thinking ahead far enough to decide what is most important. That is a huge source of stress. I know I've been guilty of that in my life, and I probably just built into my personality, so I basically work on that on a regular basis to maintain and be careful what I say yes to. Read, study habit change. I mentioned JamesClear.com, The Power of Habits, Atomic Habits, build in time with friends, and work to increase your sleep, 6 to 8 hours a night. I think 8 hours is better, and if you're really tired, fatigued, feeling highly stressed, try sleeping an extra, try to get 8 hours. What ends up happening is a lot of times your subconscious will work on those stressors you've been working on, mental and emotional stressors. A lot of times you'll come up and feel more centered and more capable of solving those issues. The last part is on spiritual stress reduction. I do believe in prayer. I mentioned that earlier, mentioned that. I think there's a very great value in that. I think that nearly all religions have a way to help people see that there is a higher power, there is a purpose, and there is something in the universe that is protecting and keeping us on a path if we'll listen. I think meditation is very important. It's not really the same quite thing as praying. Meditation is more of a centering activity of the mind, where you sit quietly. Usually transcendental meditation, you'll sit quietly and breathe and focus on your breath and clear your mind. And you spend 15 or 20 minutes with an app like, say, Headspace. There's an app called Headspace you can do. You do that for 5 or 10 tries, once a day, 15 minutes over the course of 10 days. You're going to have some interesting insights in your life, and you're going to feel better. And I believe that's because your cortisol levels are lower because you've taken time to have a little bit of a spiritual life. I also think decreasing clutter makes sense. When you live in a cluttered environment, whether unclean, you accumulate things, you have so many things you have to take care of, or multiple cars or trinkets and junk and things and collectibles and things. This is stressful because we have to maintain those things, and everything that you collect in the world, everything, becomes something you have to spend energy maintaining. Think about that. Lots of stuff has been written on the minimalist idea of less stuff, less clutter in your living space. This would be the science behind feng shui, which is the Eastern philosophy of design, room design, things like that. Spend time in nature. I just got back from the redwood forest a few months ago. Went deep into the large redwood forest, well beyond where the tourists go on a camping trip. And it was interesting how heavy and dense the forest felt. Not in a negative way, but in a way that was like, it felt dense, calming, grounding. And there is a whole science about the electromagnetic fields of the earth and how human beings are tied to those, and the grounding effect, the calming, the realigning of energy that can occur when you're in those environments. Also and you don't have to talk, you don't have to conflict with anybody, you can just go and listen to the birds, move, maybe exercise. So time in nature. When in doubt, tons of books written on this topic. Serve others and volunteer. When you have problems and you're stressed, look to help other people. That is a noble way to enlighten yourself. And that is to see people in their experience through their eyes. That's what happens when you volunteer and you help others. You see the world through their eyes. That has a remarkable effect on spiritual life and on stress reduction. And lastly, under this topic, practice forgiveness. That is, sometimes there's just things that happen in the world to you, negative injuries, traumas, social, emotional abuse, things that have gone in the past. And as Eckhart Tolle would say, that's in the past. There's nothing you can do about it now. Practice forgiveness. Say, look, Lord, there's nothing I can do about that. I'm going to just stay in the present moment, and I'm going to forgive those that have offended me, and I'm going to move forward and be as positive as possible. These are all tools, when used in conjunction or whichever you prefer, I think can lower toxic chronic stress and should improve your health when practiced consistently. I did list several articles under the further reading of that topic on the stress handout. That's going to be the end of this topic for now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and answer questions that you might have. The folks that I see here, you're welcome to chat questions as we go through this, and shoot anything over that you want. Let me see, give me just a moment. I don't know if you have to raise your hand here, what happens with this. Let me go here, text question answered. Q&A mode. I believe if you have any questions, you can ask them here. I do have a couple that I wanted to pull up from Facebook while we're talking. So let me pull that up just real quick. We have two. And we'll get those answered. And if you want, type in your question. If you have a way to just, I guess I can, if you want, if you're there, I'll turn on your mic if you have any questions, and that way it can be more of a conversation. Let me see how this works here. So those are up. Okay. And let me get the other question. I'll cover that here for you real quick, which is from Facebook. All right. So one of the questions it kind of falls under stress, but with anxiety's effect on gut health was one of the main questions. The other one was on how hormones negatively affected by stress and how that presents and how to balance with nutrition and exercise. We kind of talked about that a little bit, but we didn't talk much about the nutrition part of it, so I'll cover that real quick here. First off, anxiety, which is related to stress in many ways, is certainly associated with changes in the bacteria in the gut. So that is something that you need to be careful of, because, and I think it's one of the reasons that we see people have trouble with digestion whenever they've had high stress and anxiety situations. So there is science that shows that if you have high stress or anxiety type conditions, the normal bacteria that live in the gut actually physically change, and that can lead to problems. Long-term problems, including inflammatory bowel disease and IBS and different things like that. So these stress reduction techniques I have often used that we've already covered have also improved people's digestion. And certainly if you're in the process of reducing anxiety and stress and you start a probiotic, that would also be a good kind of way to adjunct treat that. The other question mentioned how does stress affect hormones and also affect or is it affected by nutrition? Two quick answers on that. First, one second. First issue with nutrition and stress is, I mentioned earlier in the talk, sugar, sodas, alcohol, stimulants, caffeine, nicotine, things like that, all cause cortisol levels to rise and therefore will trigger off higher stress. So you want to be careful with those kind of foods if you're struggling with stress, because those are nutritional stressors, if you will, physical stressors. The other thing that can happen if you have high stress is that it can unbalance the hormones. Your adrenal glands don't have an infinite ability to kick out stress hormones all the time, cortisol. Actually, the body's kind of smart. And what it does is the longer you're pumping out cortisol 24/7, this is over many years, what begins to happen is the body says, well, look, if this guy's or gal is in fight or flight mode 24/7, there is actually no major reason we should be making sex hormones. So the body starts to down-regulate those sex hormones. So what ends up happening is testosterone levels drop. Progesterone in women tends to drop first. They start to be anxious, they start to have moodiness, they start to have irregular periods, men start to have low libido, low energy, they lose their muscle tone, get a big fat belly. All of these things start to happen whenever cortisol has been high for a long time, because the body says we don't need to make these sex hormones anymore. We're not procreating, we're trying to fight for our lives every day because, you know, the saber-toothed tiger's in the room 24/7. That's how we're made. So you got to keep in mind that this, you know, when we talk about stress and physical, mental, social, emotional, all these things, people think it's somehow separate, like it's like, oh yeah, he's talking about stress again. It's like, it's all in your head. It's not all in your head. And the longer it goes on and you ignore it, it becomes a real medical problem. It becomes something that it will change your hormones. It will change how you look. It will lead, based on your genetics, if you apply enough stress over time, it will cause specific diseases. We already mentioned them. So I hope that answers those questions about how anxiety and nutrition are tied in with stress. I'm going to take one quick look here. I don't see any new questions here. Text question answer mode has been enabled. Q&A mode. I don't see. Let me look real quick here. Q&A, chat Q&A. I do not see any questions here. So I tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and I guess I might log off. What I will do, as I mentioned, I'm going to post the stress handout. I'm also going to post the whole video for those of you who missed it. And you can go ahead and ask questions there, and I'll do the best I can to answer those in a text format. I always like to do it in the video better. I hope this was useful for you guys. We went about 38 minutes or so, 40 minutes. Hopefully next go round we can do it where there's some kind of live questions, because I know there's people that are live on this, but I don't see questions, and I don't see a way to just turn on. I don't see a way just to turn on the sound for them to ask questions. So we'll just leave it at that. I hope this has been good information for you. If you find that it was and you think it might be helpful for someone, please repost that on Facebook. Repost it, share our website, NRG Tribe, and the YouTube page as well. I think this information, if for me seeing patients in clinic, this is something I'm seeing 85 to 90% of the people I see have some shape, form of stress-related illness. I think more people need to talk about this. And I think there's very legit ways to address it. We can't take away all stress, nor is that the goal. But the goal is to decrease the intensity and sustained stress so that our bodies can recharge and achieve some type of balance. So again, I'll sign off at this point. Look for this to be posted again on the various websites I mentioned. And I thank you for attending and listening. And I hope that you will comment on where this is posted on the Facebook page. Go ahead and comment if there's other topics you'd like to hear or things that you'd like me to cover in the future. I hope y'all have a good evening. Take care.